Today I finally wrap up painting all of the miniatures from the original Nemesis board game. I decided to use Turbo Dork paint for painting the 4 main enemies from this game, including these adult alien miniatures. Using Turbo Dork paint produces some remarkable results, but it also comes with its own set of challenges. As I finish up painting these final miniatures for Nemesis, I'll share my thoughts on the highs and lows of using Turbo Dork color shift paint. Welcome to Treehane Miniatures. For most of these colors, Turbo Dork recommends painting over a black primer for best results. I'm choosing ColorForge Matte Black, but any flat black primer should work. I'm using 40 glasses for these adult alien miniatures. 40 glasses was the first Turbo Dork paint that caught my attention for its dramatic shift in hues from teal to purple. Many Turbo Dork colors, such as this 40 glasses, will look white in the bottle even after thorough shaking. This makes it a little difficult to know exactly when the paint has been mixed enough, so I err on the side of excess. If the paint isn't thoroughly mixed, it won't produce the desired effect. After trying a few different products to thin these paints, I had the best results with this inexpensive airbrush thinner from Hobby Lobby. It contains an acrylic copolymer that helps keep the heavy metallic pigments in suspension. It's significantly less expensive than the Turbo Dork thinner, and I'm cheap. I also noticed that the Turbo Dork thinner is much more viscous than other thinners. This caused me some concern about whether or not it would flow through my airbrush properly. To this thinner, I still add a little flow improver to aid the paint through the airbrush. This mix was the most effective compromise I found between keeping the mix from separating and ensuring a smooth flow through the airbrush. Turbo Dork recommends using a 0.5 mm airbrush and setting your compressor to 30 psi. I imagine this is due to the high viscosity of the paint. However, the paint is also fairly sticky. Even with a larger airbrush and a high pressure setting, I felt like I was on the clock, so to speak. I felt like I had to move fast before my airbrush began to gum up. I had to thoroughly clean my airbrush more often when using Turbo Dork than with any other paint I've used. This is my final enemy tutorial for this game, but these adult aliens were actually the first miniatures I painted with Turbo Dork. As soon as I began spraying these miniatures with 4D glasses, I was shocked by how dramatic and instantaneous the effect was. I wasn't expecting to achieve this level of vibrance over black primer so quickly. The results look fantastic after just a single coat, but I still applied 2 coats of paint as Turbo Dork recommends. The plus side of speed painting with Turbo Dork is that this single layer of paint provides all the shadows, midtones, and highlights from a single bottle. The painting process I'm using with this paint today is very similar to how I batch paint miniatures with a colored primer. I'm covering the entire model with the dominant color of the piece, and then I'll use a standard brush to paint a few details that I want to be a different color. The main difference in the process between using Turbo Dork and using colored primer is that this one layer of Turbo Dork accomplishes the base color, shade, and highlights all in one stroke. When using colored primer for the base layer, I still have to shade and highlight that midtone color. This is a huge time saver when using Turbo Dork and its main advantage. Well, that and how uniquely cool it looks. A downside of using Turbo Dork is how uniquely cool it looks. These colors are so very specific. I have no idea what else I would use them on or if I'll ever use them again. And these paints aren't exactly inexpensive either. I picked them up at my local game store for $7 per bottle. I think if you were to paint an army with one of these colors, the value is definitely there. But doing what I'm doing, where I'm choosing a different color for each enemy type and painting just a handful of miniatures with each color, the cost may outweigh the benefit. I'm sure I'll change my mind about the value if I can find other miniatures to use these paints on. As it stands, I'm very pleased that I finally gave Turbo Dork a try, and I do love the results. The next step is to base coat the areas of the model that aren't part of this purple and teal exoskeleton. I'm choosing dark plum for this. Shocking, I know. For this step, I like to choose a single color for every feature of the model regardless of the colors that will follow. Neutral colors such as dark browns or grays also work very well for this. On this alien mini, the remaining features are squishy bits that aren't covered by the exoskeleton, so I feel dark plum is an appropriate choice. In addition to the arms and legs, I use this color to pick out small details that to me look like exposed tendons or ligaments in between the exoskeleton plates. Painting a few key details like these will help break up the monotony of the 4D glasses that is so pervasive over the entire miniature. Every detail we paint around the exoskeleton will help the 4D glasses look even more impressive. The most baffling part of making content on these color shift paints is getting them to read correctly on camera. My bright studio lights are completely obliterating the shift to purple, and this guy looks almost entirely teal. I snapped a quick work in progress photo with my phone under the same lights, but it does show the shift from teal to purple a little better. I'm using pink, which is labeled magenta, to highlight the dark plum that we use to paint the various exposed tendons and the inside of the mouth. I allow some of the dark plum to remain visible as the shadow color for these attributes. I'm kind of just dragging the side of my brush over the raised surfaces of these features. Another key benefit of speed painting with Turbo Dork paints is that it is the star of the show. The bright color shifting hues are what grab people's attention. I can paint these surrounding details very quickly and very simply without it negatively impacting the overall look of the piece. I'm basically providing a backdrop for the Turbo Dork paints to shine. I use a mix of ice yellow and magenta to highlight the pink flesh. I'm only highlighting the central portion of the raised ridges of the tendons. I'm careful not to allow this color to flow into the recesses. I was pretty carefree with that pink layer, but now I'm being more precise. The main trick that I use here is that I offloaded much more paint from my brush. This isn't dry brushing in the slightest regard, but paint also isn't flowing freely from my brush. The mouth gets a few distinct dots of paint to make it look shiny. The legs and arms get a single highlight over the dark plum. For these, I'm using a mix of ice yellow and dark plum. This is kind of an odd choice in that this mix looks very similar to the magenta pro acrylic I just used. But since this is the only highlight for these areas, it will look different from the other details we just painted. Most notably, these areas won't look as bright or shiny. These highlights are looking good, but I decide to tone them down just a little bit. I use a watered down mix of dark plum to glaze over the highlights. They looked a little bright, and I felt the highlights on the legs in particular may draw the viewer's attention away from the face and upper torso. This light glaze also makes the highlights look more integrated in the surface of the flesh. Well, this wraps up painting the adult aliens from the Nemesis board game, and it wraps up painting the game as a whole. It feels good to finally have a fully painted game to play. As a whole, I would say that my experience with Turbo Dork paints was a positive experience. I don't think I would consider it a necessary weapon in my painting arsenal, but it may be a product that I return to very infrequently, as specific situations arise. I'd like to thank my amazing channel members for supporting what I do on this channel. You too can become a channel member for as little as $1.99 per month and receive perks such as early access to videos, extended versions of our painting tutorials, and even a tier that lets you choose which miniature I paint next. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community that spends 3 years painting a single game.